Hi, I'm Jeremy Crosby.
And I'm Nick Boucher. We're the hosts for the program that's all about your city, Talking Fitchburg.
Every day, we pull together the news, events, and information you need to stay on top of what's happening in the city of Fitchburg.
Find Talking Fitchburg on cable TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and our live stream on the web. Plus, you can view all our headlines and stories on Facebook, YouTube, and our video on demand service. This is your city.
Keep up with Talking Fitchburg and the issues that affect you and your neighbors.
Want to know what's happening in your city? Get Notify Me messages from the City of Fitchburg. Visit fitchburgwi.gov on your computer or mobile device and select the big Notify Me button on the left. Enter your email and/or phone number, whichever is best for you to get notifications. Scroll down the list and select all the topics you're interested in to receive email or text messages about. You'll be notified every time one of your topics is updated. Sign up for Notify Me, one more way to keep up with your Fitchburg government.
Yeah, just give me 1 second. Oh, I'm ready. I'm trying to remember who's all here. Okay. Amagashi.
Here.
Gerhardt.
Here.
Gorman. Here. Mertens. Here. Sanders. Here. Shimming. McKee. No. And Farmer Eden. And Olivia. Great. We have a quorum. Perfect. It looks like we also have Mark Hamilton from CETA on the line. Anybody else? Looks like somebody called in. Is that Nate? Hey, Nate. Can you tell who's on the phone? Hi, can you tell me who's on the phone, please?
That's Mark Hamilton.
Oh, okay, perfect. We have a quorum.
Would anyone like to move to approve the minutes with regard to August 12th, 2024?
So move, Madam Chair.
Second?
Second.
Minutes are approved. Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to read that. Okay. All in favor of approving minutes? Aye.
Aye.
Nay. Aye. Minutes are approved. Do we have any public appearances for non-agenda items? Look like it? Do you have any resolutions or ordinances? I don't believe so. Then,
Mallory, could you speak into the mic a little bit more? I'm having a hard time hearing you.
that's because it wasn't on. That's why, Olivia. Now it's on. We have our presentation from Mike and Steve with regard to H&A Advisors, with regard to our rent-to-own program and updates. Would you guys like to start with your presentation?
Yeah, we'll give a little introduction
Sure.
To how we got to where we are today here. And is it showing up, Scott?
Get an external monitor set up.
I might need your help on that. I know Joyce and Green sent committee members we presented to the committee of the whole meeting just a couple weeks ago and did a housing overview, which is the first time we've really kind of been to the council and providing them an overview of all our housing activities. since the housing plan was completed in 2019. And as part of that discussion, we gave an overview of the different programs that we've been focused on. As this group is well aware, we launched the Efficiency Navigator program, working with Sustained Gain in Elevate, Wisconsin, which is off to a great start and getting really good interest. We're continuing to vet and evaluate the workforce housing units within market rate. That one we're going to run through probably an existing TID district, hopefully with a pilot project that would be for a building on Index Road. And then the third one that we've been tracking on is our rent-to-own townhome program. And that's why we have Mike and Steve here tonight. That program for longtime people, and Gabriella, I guess you fall into that category now as far as elected officials, where we brought that one to the council back in June of 2021, and the program was unanimously approved at that time. And then once we got the approval from the council, the administration and finance asked us to do more due diligence, and that's why in your packet there was a memo. I had a hard time getting
To your left, or to your right. Okay. Screen to your right.
Got it, okay. Because I'm working off of two screens here now, right? Yep. Okay. Okay, now we're active here. And so this program was unanimously approved by the council in 2021. Then administration asked us to do more due diligence, including reaching out to potential stakeholders and partners, and also checking in with a law firm on not only the program mechanics, but also kind of liability questions and concerns if there was a potential program, and we did that with Quarles and Brady. So that's why in your packet there was a memo that Mike and Steve had put together that gave a really good summary of all of the due diligence, outreach, and then the legal analysis that we had done since June of 2021. So in providing an update to the council at the committee of the whole meeting a couple weeks ago, we had some questions from the council folks specifically about the rent to own. And so we thought that we would utilize this meeting, and we invited CETA and council members to join us this evening as a work session to really delve into kind of the program model, the numbers associated with it, and kind of the aspects that have changed since the program was approved in 2021. And just to give you a quick overview, and Mike and Steve will really delve into the details of it there, but this program is targeted towards the missing middle, which is 80 to 100% of median income, which was one of the priorities identified in our 2019 housing plan to focus on ownership for that missing middle. The unique aspect of this program is that it's structured to make sure that the folks that would be part of the rent-to-own period would, their cost of housing would be no more than 30%. And during that rental period, it enables them to build up the down payment that they need to transition to a conventional mortgage. And Michael, Steve will show you through their model. I think we're looking at about 4 years if you're at 100% of median income, and about 8 years if you're at 80% of median income. The other aspect of this program that we as staff really liked is that it's not only helping people that are maybe ready for home ownership but maybe can't get into it right now by helping them build up that down payment assistance, but it's hopefully for first-time home buyers whose families maybe have never had ownership before. So we like the aspect of the generational wealth building. When it was approved in 2021 with council support, we were looking at utilizing $1 million of the dollars from our TID for Housing Fund and then debt financing the rest of the program. It would be a 10-unit kind of townhome project there and about 1,400 square feet, and Mike and Steve are going to show some examples. And then we were looking at kind of a unit value of $332,000. The tenants would participate with $5,000 in down payment assistance. And then there would also be a payment in lieu of taxes, a pilot that would be part of this program. And again, focused on no more than 30% of their income. A lot has changed obviously since 2021. So I know some of the questions we got at the committee of the whole meeting is, well, we thought the value of the units was 332, which it was in 2021. But as we know, the world kind of changed in the construction and real estate industry, and this program model and our product reflects that, just like you see in current market conditions and everything. So we're still looking at a market rate unit with 1,400 square feet. But now we have the benefit of, we've closed a couple more successful tax increment districts. So we have $9.5 million in the bank that we've been looking to utilize for our various housing programs. So with that, we now have the benefit of being to self-fund and self-finance this program and kind of control our destiny more in this higher interest rate environment. And remember, one of the principles of this program, the way Mike and Steve have modeled it, is it's an endowment program. So about 95 to 96% of the funds would come back to us as people are transitioning out from rental to ownership when they transition to the conventional mortgage there. So we're still at that 30%, no more of their income for housing. The unit costs now are up to $416,500, which tracks with appreciation, and Joyce can kind of maybe delve into that a little bit more as far as housing appreciation here in Fitchburg from 2021 to 2024, because we track very closely with that as far as what we've seen in our housing stock here in Fitchburg. But the purpose of tonight's meeting is really to let Mike and Steve do a deep dive into not only the program model and the principles that it's based on, but also the financials of it, so that way we can answer any questions and or concerns that folks have, and hopefully get the green light eventually when we go back to the council to go forward with the next phase, which would be looking at the contracts and agreements and the language associated with that for a potential builder-developer as well as a management company. That would be kind of that next set of work that we think will also answer more questions and concerns as we look forward to doing a potential pilot, finding some land and doing a potential pilot program. Joyce, you got anything else to add?
No, I think one of the things that, when we're talking at the 80% with the takeout of in year 8, we still haven't talked about that policy decision on how that equity would look, how that split would take place at that 8th year. We could probably get people out of the program much earlier if we looked at less equity going back to CETA and more going towards the owners so they can transition to a conventional mortgage. But that was one of the policy decisions that was never really looked at, or there were no recommendations from either the Housing Advisory Committee or CETA. So that would be something that's still outstanding that could change the dynamics of the entire program. But I guess I can let Mike and Steve talk a little bit more about that. But I did find some really interesting facts about appreciation in Fitchburg. And like the last 2 years from Q1 of 2022 to Q1 of 2024, we're looking at a total of appreciation in that 2-year period of 25.22%. So, I mean, if you look at where our average assessment is, $457,900 is the average assessment on a single-family home. And this project coming in at $416,500, we're still below what the average is for valuation here in Fitchburg. I tried to, on these slides, just kind of highlight some of the changes because there has been some really dramatic changes in the market. I'm probably low on some of my estimations for construction costs because I can see Brian taking a good look at that, but I want to be a bit conservative in doing that comparison. But if you have anything to share, please feel free to chime in at any point, anyone. I think that's it for me.
And with that, I guess we'll turn it over to Mike and Steve to take us through their presentation and kind of the numbers and the analysis that they've got. And definitely, ask your questions and Mike and Steve did a really good presentation to Joyce and I where they really took us through the line items of the numbers and kind of tracked back to where they came from to really give us a thorough explanation. And that's really the purpose of this evening, is to utilize this as a work session to get everybody's questions answered for the program. With that, I'll turn it over to Mike and Steve. Yep.
Mike, do you want us to wait until the end to ask questions, or do you want us to wait? Can we interject, or how would you like to run this? Or Mallory, I should be asking, I don't know.
Yeah.
Who should I be asking?
You know, I would prefer asking them as we go along, just because there's a lot of spreadsheets here and numbers that I was trying to tie out, and I'm going to forget it if we get to the end. So I think I'd rather, as we go along, ask questions, if that's possible.
Thanks.
And with that, we'll turn it over to Mike and Steve. They've got the slides, and they're going to take us through those.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mike, and thank you for the opportunity to come back and talk about this important concept with the Housing Advisory Committee. I want to especially thank the committee for its patience and its willingness to hang in there. We've been working on this for quite a long time, and I know you have had a great deal of interest in trying to see something happen on the ground here in Fitchburg, and we certainly wanted to be a part of helping to facilitate that. Today, given the opportunity, we really wanted to take whatever time you can afford to walk through this program and remind everybody of what the fundamentals of it are, but also to get as deep as you care to go into the financials, so that hopefully you have at least some level of understanding and comfort as to what the concepts are that we are working with. I'm going to ask that our slideshow be advanced. I've got a few things that I want to bring up on my screen and share as well. Okay, let me try this. I'm having trouble triggering my slides to activate. I'm in the slideshow mode, but it doesn't seem to be advancing. Is that advancing here, though? It's supposed to. What the heck's going on? This mic froze. Yeah, I don't see your mouse going anywhere here. Over here. What is there? Close your presentation and restart it.
Since we're waiting, just wanted to let you know that Mario has joined us, and he is on CETA.
Okay. Try to advance just to make sure. Okay. Thanks for the patience again. So, there's been some comment about the basic fundamentals of this idea by both Mike and by Joyce, but we want to talk about the fact that this is an idea that really is targeted at a very specific slice of the needy population in terms of workforce housing in Dane County, in particular in Fitchburg. And this is individuals that would fall within that missing, what's been referred to as the missing middle, the 80 to 100% of the median county income. And that is the target. This is an opportunity for those families and individuals that have not had the opportunity to be homeowners to become homeowners for the first time. It utilizes a rent-to-own concept wherein the city, through its Community Development Authority, would build and own the project during a period of time in which the property would be gaining in equity and appreciation to the point where ultimately the home could be sold to the tenant utilizing conventional financing. And we are estimating that that could occur for the individual in the 100% category as soon as 4 years, in the 80% category as soon as 8 years. Something that I think is important to remind everybody of is how we got to the concept that we are utilizing. We ended up focusing on a product that is a townhome type of unit, the size of which is approximately 1,450 square feet. It would have 3 bedrooms, 2 and 2.5 baths. And as to whether they're connected or in duplex format, that will depend upon the exact site that ultimately is identified and can be procured. I want to mention that we also spent a good deal of time working with the CEDA, with the council, the Plan Commission, and the Housing Advisory Committee to arrive at exactly what these units would look like through the conducting of the survey that was done back in the beginning of this process. And this was the result was the concept that evolved. I think another very important element of this that we don't want to ever lose track of is that in addition to this being a program that could be replicated again and again, this program would continue to make it possible for an individual to not have to spend more than 30% of their income on housing, not only at the beginning, but also all the way through to the point that they would convert to conventional financing. And I think that's a very important element to be able to track and understand, is the affordability concept of this thing. I want to flip back to these are some examples of the type of units. These are not obviously the final products at all, but what we did is we researched building types and designs that would fall into the category of the type of and size of units that would be the type that came out of the survey, and this is an example of one of those unit types of structures and units. This is just another of those within the plan that we had finalized, and this was the document that you may all recall was submitted and ultimately approved unanimously by the council back in October of 2021. We had some more specific designs. These were the duplex versions of this, and they also included a 2-car garage. And the floor plan itself for these units was it had 2.5 bathrooms. There was 1,415 square feet, 715 square feet on the first floor, and 699 square feet on the second floor. Another similar concept was this would take a little more land, of course, because of the layout of the structure and the building. But again, until a site is identified, the exact design is yet to be determined. But we wanted to at least get far enough into it to be able to say that we've researched the capability of developing a design that would meet the standards that we were trying to achieve with the product. Going back to the slideshow, I'm going to turn it over to Steve and ask him to continue with this.
Sure. Thank you, Mike. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having us. What we wanted to do is talk about the concept in detail, and I know a couple of weeks ago when we talked about this, there seemed to be a lot of questions about that with the council, and there had been really, I think, a period of time where we haven't been able to update everyone as to what's taken place during the 3-year period. It's almost 3 years now since the last time that our report was updated. There's been a number of things that have taken place, a number of models that have been rerun to the point of trying to get the concept to continue to work in spite of rising interest rates, rising construction costs, in the markets that we're dealing within. We've updated that now. We still think the concept is viable, and I think it's up to the CETA, I think it's up to the Housing Advisory Committee and the Council to decide, does this make some sense? Should we continue down this track as we go forward? What I wanted to do is talk a little bit about what the timeline looks like if you were to proceed with this project. And remember, by approving the project at this point doesn't commit the city to the project and completing the project. We've tried to design this so that there's stops along the way that we can assess where we're at and see if it continues to make some sense. The next major stop that we were hoping to get to would be to get to the point where we could refine the numbers with actual on-the-ground circumstances. At this point, we've updated the model that we put together in 2021 with construction costs, with interest rates, but we don't have a site that specifically would lay out what that building looks like. Mike has presented some ideas, but we don't have for sure, is it 1,400, is it 1,375 square foot? What does design look like? What does the material look like? And what's the cost of the site? So what we see is if this concept were to be approved at some point, we would move ahead to try to get to that, answer that question, and bring that back to this group to say, here's what we're really talking about. Here's a real number based on the retention of a builder. Here's the real site costs, and this is what conceptually it might look like at this point, and decide if that continues to fit the needs of the city. So as we're going to talk in the presentation, we're going to look at really 4 different cash flows in the PowerPoint that's been put together. The first one is, how do we create the Housing Endowment Fund? Remember, the endowment fund concept is to put money into that's dedicated for housing, not just for this project, but for subsequent projects in the future. And we've designed this so that there are funds continuing to come back into the fund that can be used for future projects again and again. So it revolves like a revolving loan fund, so those funds continue to be available into the future. So creation of the fund. Second would be then, how do we build the project? And this slide that you're looking at identifies 3 major steps in regards to cash flows that we're going to be talking about. The first, in regards to building the project that you'll see there, is what I just talked about, which is how do we get better numbers and know for sure that the project is viable based on an actual site, based on an actual builder, and based on an actual management company. In 22, I think it was spring of 22, we had approval to move ahead with RFPs for developer builders as well as management companies. We've held off on that given other issues that we primarily looked at, which was the risk assessment that had been identified, as well as the legal assessment. We're at the point, I think, if the project were to go ahead, is to try to get to that point of identifying those 3 areas, coming back then with a concept to say, here's the numbers, here's what it looks like, and how do we go ahead. So we're looking at, over the next year, about if we were to receive approval, to do the RFP process, to work at the development of that concept and bring that back for approval. So that's a step that you would have that would say, let's look at it before we go to the next step. Should you proceed then, the next cash flow would be to say, what does that look like on a rent basis? In other words, the project would get built if you decide to proceed. The project would be built, and then it would be rented to the individual tenants after the tenants have been screened. So the middle arrow that you see there would be the period of time in which the tenant would be paying their rent. And that's important to understand, is because they would be covering the costs of the project. There would be no cost to the city or to CETA, and anything left over then would be put into a special fund which creates that equity that the individual would need for their 20% of the amount that would be the down payment to leverage the conventional financing. So during the rent period, we're accruing sufficient funds and in our projections, 20% then of the current value of the unit, so that they can put themselves in a position then to buy that unit. Now, what also takes place...
Can I just interrupt for a second?
Sure.
Can I just ask a question? Thanks. So you've identified land and a builder.
Yep.
The money to purchase the land and the money that goes to the builder is coming from the fund.
Yes.
What are you calling the fund?
The endowment fund.
Okay. The endowment fund. So all of that money is coming from the fund.
Yes.
And is it a purchase of all the parcels at the same time? What does that look like?
I think the discussion we've had up to this point is to try to get an option on the property for some period of time. Certainly there would be a cost, but it minimizes the cost up front to the city in regards to the project. Get that option, work with the developer. Now remember, the project would not get built. We'd be working with the developer on some basis to help develop then specific construction parameters then for the project, so we know what that would cost. So we would have not a lot of out-of-pocket expenses to get to that particular point of being able to say, this is what it looks like, this is what it's going to cost, and do we proceed with the project?
Okay, and at this point, you've already identified, well, Mike, or you guys have already identified eligible or interested buyers.
Well, the third part of that would be to identify a management company, because we believe that CETA doesn't want to operate this, that we've tried to outsource all of these responsibilities to minimize the time and the effort on the part of CETA. That management company would be retained at the same time that the developer would be retained. We believe that that interaction would be helpful in the design, because they're going to have to manage the project and want to make sure that, that they feel comfortable with the layout so that they can manage the company. That management company then would assist in screening the tenants and ultimately selecting the tenants. Now, we did talk with, initially we talked about private companies, and we've interviewed, I think, 2 or 3 companies going back to 2021 that had shown an interest in that. More recently then, we've talked to various groups in the Dane County area that provide housing and management services. We've talked to them, and if I recall, there's probably 3 different groups that would be interested in providing...
Any of them nonprofits?
Yeah, and even nonprofits that would be interested in working on a partnership with the city. There hasn't been any determination made as to who it is, but I think we're comfortable that there are a number of sufficiently experienced management companies out there that could be a great partner for this project.
Right, and then so in future slides, do we have kind of numbers on that, or is that still yet to be determined?
You mean the cost? The cost for the management?
Correct, of the management, of the land, of the option to buy, of the actual building itself, etc.
Yes, and we'll go through those in the slides, and if we forget to answer that question, feel free to remind us once again, please. So,
Great, thank you.
So that's how those had been the preliminary discussions in terms of how we will proceed. And to highlight, the tenant would pay 30% of their income as rent, and then at the time that they purchase, this is the third step that you see in these arrows that are there, at the time that they've achieved the 20% down payment that they can leverage the loan amount is sized so that they continue to pay 30% of their income towards housing. So that's important, because when you do the math nowadays, if you're looking at a $450,000 structure that you're purchasing, and if you're at $83,000 at the 80% level, $84,000 in our model, if you take the mortgage out and you look at all the other related costs, it's going to be greater than 30%, just based on current taxes that are going to be being paid, based on the mortgage rates. This is set up such that the mortgage amount takeout then is set up so that they continue to pay 30% of their income as they go forward. And that identifies to what Joyce was talking about before, which is a policy question. Because we're carrying some of that going forward, does that get paid back at the time that they either sell the unit or the mortgage matures in 30 years. And that's down the road in discussions, but that's what raises that particular question. So these are the key steps that we looked at in terms of this concept. And so let's go on from that to the next slide then, if we could, Mike.
Okay, so we've already talked about the fact that we had approval on this. We also had an engagement for phase 2, which called for us to begin the process of soliciting RFPs for the developer and for the management company, and to hopefully identify a site. We had actually gotten as far as drafting those RFPs and submitted those to the city. We also had identified, I think, 5 sites, maybe four sites that could have been brought forward. They were never, the contact was never formally made with the property owner at that time. We were just trying to identify whether there were any potential areas at that moment that could lend themselves to this concept. And we did find, with the help of the city staff, we identified those possibilities. We kind of got the brakes put on because there was a desire on part of administration to do more diligence on these questions of risk, as well as on the questions associated with some cost elements. So we went through that. Ultimately, there was also concern about the amount of time that was going to be demanded of city staff to make a project like this work, which is understandable. And with that in mind, the desire was to go out and see who else would be these potential partners. And we ended up talking with 8 or 9 different entities in Dane County that are delivering versions of housing for workforce and in the affordability space throughout the county. I think it's fair to say that there wasn't one of them that had that challenged the concept that we had offered. They all looked at and did their homework, looked at our numbers, felt that it was an intriguing concept, and as Steve had mentioned, there were 3 to 4 of those that had expressed a willingness to work with the city in further discussions to see whether there was a partnership that could be melded to help either manage or in some way help, if nothing else, screen tenants for a project of this type. So we were encouraged by that, that concept. To remind everybody, and the question was asked, where's this money coming from? Originally, the game plan here wasn't to have the city put as much money into this deal as we're now talking about. That only became necessary because of the cost factors here. In order to continue to bridge that gap and to make sure that people didn't have to spend more than 30% of their income for housing, it became necessary to eliminate the cost of interest in this deal. That's really what drove the need to bring more cash into this from the city's side of the equation. And we'll talk about how that looked in more specific detail, but that's really how we got to the idea of having to have cash funding. The fact that the city is in the position to be able to do that is unique. This city has had a tremendous amount of success with its tax increment program. And that program is what's generating the capital that's necessary to make this work. You have captured over $9 million in revenue from the final year of your successful tax increment districts, which has been set aside and is required to be used. If you want to use it that additional year, you're able to capture it as long as you use it for affordable housing. So that you've done that, and this provides that kind of a resource. We're talking about using approximately 4 of that 9 for this particular undertaking, but you might say, well, that's half of it. You know, that's a heck of a lot of the money to be utilizing for this particular program. In a minute, we'll talk about that some more, because if interest rates were to continue to go down, we can reduce the amount of that money that's necessary. We don't know where we're going to be until we get there in terms of some of these costs. So we'll have to be a little flexible. Hopefully, and I don't ever say worst case scenario because we've seen some crazy things, folks, that have happened, but in terms of the numbers, we think we built in a new level of conservatism into this that we think we can beat what we're talking about presenting to you here tonight. But in any event, it's $4 million, and it could be less if we are fortunate. We're using an interest rate that's higher than what's actually out there and necessary right now. Steve, you want to continue?
Sure. So the question was asked, where did the money come from? This cash flow is one of 4 cash flows that we'll review. The first one that says, how does the money, where does it come from? And as Mike just talked about, it's the tax increment districts. We would envision a joint powers agreement between CDA and the city, transferring the TIF monies from the city to the CDA into an endowment fund. The funds would be dedicated for housing. That would be up to the $4 million that we talked about to give us the maximum flexibility. So first question, where does the money come from TIF? It's in the endowment fund and would be drawn down then for the project as approved in the future based on additional finalization of the numbers. So with that, Mike, let's go to the next slide. The second cash flow, in this particular case, it's the first arrow that we talked about that I had talked about before, was the question of the construction cash flow funds. And so that's that issue of what is it going to cost for the project, what funds are we using, and how are we using those funds. The funds would be used then to acquire the site. It would be used then to solicit proposals, both from a developer builder as well as management company based on criteria that the city would put together. It would also then, we envision, have funds to hire a construction manager to help oversee then the actual construction of the funds. Those funds then would be used then with the approval of the project that had been designed, with the builder being retained, and would be dispersed then from the fund based on a drawdown based on a construction schedule. So that would be the funds. So Mike, do you want to talk about those funds, please?
So this slide has an abbreviated summary of sources and uses of funds for this project. If you look at the box on the left side, these are the sources where the money is coming from. You'll see it adds up to over $4 million. It's $4,164,000. The top number is the $3,752,092. This is the tax increment advance that we do expect would be repaid by the individuals purchasing the homes. This is the money that comes back into the fund and would be utilized to replicate the program again and again going forward. And that's what makes this program different from some of the other programs, all of which are great programs out there. We aren't saying that this is necessarily better than another program, because there's a lot of ways you got to go about skinning this cat if you're going to address the problem that you're talking about. But this one does do one thing that a lot of them are not doing, and that it recaptures the money so that you can do this again and again and again. So that money is coming back. There's also, each individual is expected to bring at least $5,000 of their own equity to the table in order to participate. So that's $50,000 for 10 units. We've set aside $99,000 for debt service reserve and working capital in this program. If that isn't all needed, that money is also funds that come back, and this is contingency dollars. And then we've got legal and program execution for $63,000, and we have an outside grant assumed for $200,000, adding up to the total sum for the project. That money will be utilized. We're currently assuming, and again, this is a continually moving wild card, $577,000 in land acquisition until we can identify a site. We don't know whether that's realistic necessarily or not. The construction costs are numbers that we had vetted with builders at the time and have updated based upon appreciation and inflation since 2021. We've got other soft costs for professional services and financing, the contractor and builder fees, and so on. These are the numbers that add up to the $4,164,000. I would like to digress from the slideshow for just a second and take a look at one thing that we did here just recently in this particular piece here, this spreadsheet that I'm showing on my slide. I'm not sure how visible that is to everyone there, but I've got several columns here. We've got our original, some of the numbers from our original plan. We updated this in June of 22, and now we've most recently updated it in August of 24. But in our original plan, the project costs were $3,324,000. In the update, the first update, they had grown 19% to $3,965,000. That right there was a $640,000 jump. And now in 24, it's $4,164,000, or 25% increase over our original numbers, or increased over $839,000. This is a significant change. The interest rate went from 3.2 up to 7.3% in that period of time. We've changed a number of other assumptions, but again, all of these assumptions, I won't go through every single one of these, but you can see why, because of the radical change in the numbers, it necessitated our increasing. The original ante we were looking at for the TID upfront funds was only $920,000 in the beginning. That increased to $2,320,000 in our June update, and now we're at $3,377,000 in the city participation. Again, if interest rates drop, those numbers will go back down. And so I wanted to at least comment on that. And
can I ask a quick question that hasn't been clear to me? How much of the money is repaid eventually? So that how much would actually come from the housing fund, and then how much do you anticipate would come back, and at what timeline?
We are expecting ultimately let me get that slide back up for you. Hang on a second here. So we would expect that $3,752,000 of the $4,164,000 would come back. There's the $99,000 and the $63,000 that's also coming from tax increment dollars that may not come back. That would be a contribution. So you're looking at about $160,000 of cash that would not come back to the city from the program, would come out of the tax increment fund and would not get repaid. But that $99,000 of that 160 is still possible.
And how long would it take for that money to come back?
90% of the $3,752,000 would come back either at the 4-year point or at the 8-year point, depending upon whether you were an 80% income person or a 100% income person.
Mike, can you talk about what things could impact that 4-year and 8-year return? In other words, there are factors that could influence that as well.
Yes, absolutely. On the positive side, if a homeowner's income grows faster, than what we have projected in the projections. That could accelerate their ability to take the loan out and go to conventional financing. Conversely, if their income didn't grow as fast as is projected, then they would take a little longer to have to get to that point. Other factors that could affect that would be the interest rate that would be available at the time of takeout. Now, in the assumptions that we've made, we were using a interest cost of 7.3% at the time of takeout, which is about 1 full percentage point higher than where we are right now today. But these are moving pieces that would impact that number. Obviously, some of the other. Steve, did you want to say something?
I was just going to add that the reason we're saying 4 to 8 years, people are that's the bracket group of workforce housing that we're looking at, and so somebody's going to be at 90%, somebody's going to be at 83%. So depending upon where you are when you come in the program, and then how quickly your income goes up, will affect then within that bracket what the payout will be. Does that make sense?
I have a question. Does the rent payment change based on their income rising then? That's kind of what it sounds like you're saying to me. Like every year?
They will continue to pay 30% of their income.
Okay, so we reevaluate their income on an
would
annual
be evaluated
basis?
on an annual basis. And we have one slide that will show you that.
Sorry, I'm getting ahead of it.
No. It's a good question. And in terms of doing it, the other, Mike is talking about over 90% is going to be coming back at closing then within that 48-year period. There is a piece then that is going to be carried, that's the policy question that Joyce talked about, which could be additional funds coming back down the road when that unit is sold, or at the end of 30 years, if there's a second mortgage that remains outstanding. And we've estimated what that is, and we'll show you later on the slide what that is. But that's a policy question. And our thought would be that you should consider that because we're trying to get our money back, but we don't have an interest component on it based on the numbers right now. And that would be an interest component to give us more money than what we've originally invested that potentially would come back to the endowment fund. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I think Olivia's got a question. Olivia?
Hi, thank you. So I don't know if you have this number yet, but the money that is coming back minus 100 and something thousand, do we have an operating cost? Do we have an expense for this program per unit yet?
I'm going to be
because if 100 and something thousand to run this whole program, at least launch it over time, seems like a very little amount of money.
Yes. So can we, if it's okay, can we go to the next slide and try to answer that question? So, Mike, you want to put up the next one? I'll just start and you can pick up then. As we talked about, this is the second arrow that I talked about in terms of steps here. This is where you pay the rent, right? So we've built the project, we've screened tenants, and now we're gonna pay the rent. So this is the cash flow for that. So the question is, well, when does the takeout occur? So we've got a spreadsheet that Mike's going to talk through, but we've screened the tenants. The tenant we've said, let's come up with some equity so they have some skin in the game. We've said $5,000. If they're selected, we want them to have an aptitude for home ownership because there's a difference of a renter and a home ownership aptitude. That would be important. It's also important to have classes to kind of encourage and develop those skills as they're paying their rent. Remember, they're continuing to pay every year 30% of their income. So if their income's going up, our expenses are going up. That we're netting that out, and Mike will show you how that takes place. So the management company is hired. They're responsible for the management of the facility, grass cutting, paying of the sewer and water, making sure then that there's insurance on the building. They collect the rent, and then they account for the payment of the rent. There's a payment of a fee made to the management company that will show you what that is. And then there's anything left over goes into an individual account for that particular tenant that creates their equity. So that's available once they get to their 20%, which would be 20% of the current value of the building. Remember, the building is going up each year because of inflation, so that's a moving target. When we get to 20% of what it is to buy that unit at that current price, the takeout occurs because they've got 20% that's generated. So Mike, would you talk about how that 20% is generated?
This is the, I think this is the slide some of you, Gabriella and Olivia, have been waiting to see. Because this is the one that really talks about how this works from year to year in relationship to that homeowner's income. So if we look at this particular slide, let's just take the top line. We start with the annual income, and this happens to be for the 100% of median income tenant. So what we know in 2024 is that number is $110,063 for a family of 3. That's the number. So what we're saying is that we don't want that family to have to pay more than 30% of that number for housing. And that number has to include not just the cost of their quote-unquote rent or mortgage payments in the future. It also needs to include any fees for the association. It needs to include insurance, and it needs to include utilities, and it needs to include any taxes, along with any management fees. So if we take a look, first of all, we got to calculate the 30%. So 30% of 110,000 in that first column is $33,019. That's the 2024 number. Now we've added to all of these costs, we've added an appreciation rate, and we're utilizing 3.5% in a rate of appreciation in these numbers. You'll see then that the net available for housing goes from $33,000 to $34,340 in 2025, because we're assuming that their income is increasing as well. The fees, we've got a condominium fee here of $1,352. And this is an important piece here that helps make this program feasible, and it helps to build the equity during this period of time, because the city will own the project from the time that it's built to the time that the potential homeowner, which is a tenant in the beginning, until they actually are at a point where they can get conventional financing and take that out. This project is owned by the Community and Economic Development Authority. That's an important feature because it doesn't have to pay property taxes. We're not paying property taxes on this when it's owned that way. We recognize that the city still has costs nevertheless, and so what we have built into this is what we call a payment in lieu of tax, a pilot charge, a payment in lieu of tax for just the city portion of the property tax. So they pay that, and that amounts to, in the first year, $2,802 that is coming into the city's coffers for city services. But we're not doing the county, and the school district, and the other pieces with that. When we get to the point of conversion, though, and they go to conventional financing, that comes on the tax roll. It's no longer owned by the CEDA, and then they're going to start paying full property taxes, but they're also not going to be paying a management fee. So you'll see that we've got the insurance, the management fee, and the utilities all built in. So in column 1 there with 2025, we subtract all of that from the $34,000 and we get to $21,494. And that's what is going to go into their account, in the trust account. to help build their equity for purchase of that project. As you can see, that number will grow and build to $89,228 by the time we get out to the fourth year in 2028. That, along with some interest that accrued on that fund, gives us the $91,234 that is part of the renter's takeout package at that point in time. Now, this is what's key, and it's what makes this program responsive, frankly, to the affordability question, is maintaining an awareness of what it takes to keep that 30% target in mind and met each year through this process. And that's what this program does. Now, hopefully that answered some questions there.
I just have an aside. When I look at this, and it's described as renter takeout trust equity of $91,000, that would be in year 4. My concern is that if something should happen, say you need to evict someone, or you have a particular tenant that decides to leave, that there may be a characterization of that participation as equity, and they may demand that when they leave. So that any documentation that is utilized for the tenant as it relates to this process and program clearly delineate that those funds aren't available, because that has happened in a different type of rent-to-own situation where not necessarily a judge but a court commissioner determined that the amount that they had paid in was indeed equity, and they could demand that when they left.
And that's a very important concept, and it was a consideration that we gave to this as part of the design of the program, and we recognize that that is an important thing to get nailed down.
Right, that language that's used clearly indicate that that's not available.
Yeah. And that's where the
I was going to add that Quarles and Brady, when they looked at this, identified that as a major consideration, and that it needs to be dealt with in the documents up front, and it needs to be characterized as non-equity in regards to what it is.
Yeah, I looked at their memo. I mean, they talked about the 5,000. I don't know that they specifically said this number when they talked about equity, but
Yeah, and we did have, that was their memo, and we had subsequent talks with them after that, and that is certainly you highlight a certain area that we need to be very sensitive to in designing the program.
Okay. Olivia?
I have a question.
Yep.
No, this is Marshall.
Oh, hi, Marshall.
I have a question. Yeah, I was wondering, all the spreadsheets are based on a family size of 3. We have 3 bedrooms. Does this, and we have young people, maybe a couple would like to buy, does this project work with a family size of 2, a family size of 4? Just a question.
you were breaking up a little bit there, so I was having a hard time tracking a little bit.
Okay, so at a family size of 2, the 100% area median income for that family size is lower than it is for a family size of 3. And so you got this working for a family size of 3, and I'm assuming a family size, you've got a 3-bedroom, you can have 6 people in there, 2 plus, right, per unit by HUD standards or fair housing standards. So the amount of the income changes depending upon, or the 100% for a family size changes the amount that is accepted by HUD as the value of what they can bring into the project, right? And you're working on a family size of 3. I'm just asking, does this work with a family size of 2, which would have a lower income at 100%, and up to a family size of 6?
It's going to
have all, yeah.
It is. For a family of 2, we could run the numbers, but you raise a good point. I think it would be probably a touch longer if you're maybe 84% to 80% of income for a family of 2, because your income's going to be a little bit less. But, it should be, if a family 2 at 85%, my guess is going to be like 80% at 3. But we could do that analysis and haven't done it, but you raise a good point. It would be some portion that it may have an impact on, but with the 3 bedrooms, hopefully that's going to be attractive for, more than 3 residents. We just picked 3 as, there are a number of permutations with this that it could be, and we tried to simplify it and pick 3 as kind of the numbers that we've run with the income levels. But you raise a good point to look at.
Olivia, do you have a question?
I do, but I'm just going to wait for a few more slides and see how it goes.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, well, should I proceed with the slides for now? Okay. So just to talk briefly again about the takeout closing flow of funds, this is really kind of the third arrow that Steve had on his initial spreadsheet chart that showed the three basic cash flows. But the takeout and the purchase occurs once that 20% equity is achieved. That 90-some thousand that I showed in the prior slide would do that. At that point, it's at that point that we also expect that the mortgage can be sized and would be sized so that it wouldn't require more than 30% of their income for payment of that mortgage, along with those other costs that we had identified in that spreadsheet, that previous spreadsheet that I showed. It's at that juncture that CETA would receive its takeout payments, initially from the tenant trust account, and but then also from the proceeds of the mortgage that would be taken out by the tenant and paid at that time, and those dollars would, together with their balance in their trust account, be the funds that would be coming back to CETA. The other piece of that we'll talk about in a minute is the additional equity that is being built that has yet to be decided as to how that's going to be distributed, but there's a potentially an even greater upside to the Community and Economic Development Authority if it intends to capture what we think is a fair amount of equity that it would be entitled to based on the appreciation of that unit. And so, Steve?
I
guess I got.
Yeah, you've got the next one, Mike.
Sorry about that.
I have a quick question before you move on. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So kind of back to that, what if the renters are unable to, something happens in their life, they lose their job, there's a death, there's a divorce or something, and let's say they can't qualify for their mortgage. Do they just continue to be renters? And I mean, what happens, I guess, in that kind of a scenario? I mean, we have the equity question, but also do they just continue renting in perpetuity until they can afford or qualify for a mortgage? Or
the intent here is that the initial documentation of the project, which is essentially the contract or the engagement that would be signed by the tenant, the commitment between the tenant and the Community and Economic Development Authority, would define certain circumstances, and the circumstance that you're describing, we certainly anticipate that there can be, and likely will probably be, a few situations where, due to unforeseen circumstances, an individual is going to end up having either the inability to continue making their payments, or will need some additional time to complete the contract. We think that there needs to be limits on that. There needs to be limits on that, and it needs to be defined in the documentation up front so that the parties understand and agree that this is the framework within which this deal was made, and they're going to have to live with it. And so we expect to be able to accommodate some of that, but not all of it. And there's a level of reasonableness that will be attempted to be arrived at, but those will be some of those policy decisions that will be agreed to by CETA as a part of the adoption of the documentation of the program up front. But those are some questions that we expect to be able to answer with that diligence being done with those documents that are yet to be created.
And I'm assuming that would be an attorney involved in that, the drafting of that kind of that language.
Definitely.
You know, as a renter and future homeowner, that there would be legal language in those contracts that would stipulate, here are your obligations, and if you don't pay them, here's what's going to happen.
Correct.
I guess that equity question would have to be addressed as well, but.
Yes, and when the city retained Quarles and Brady, there was somebody from the Public Finance Department and somebody from the Real Estate Department. And so their Real Estate Department would be active in drafting the specific documents that would be involved with the tenant. So yes, and as Mike had pointed out in the sources and uses we talked about before, short term, we have that debt reserve that's there and working capital. And so in order to resolve that issue, might take a couple months, few months to resolve what's going to happen. We did build into that the $99,000 that's available for the whole program to take care of situations like that from a cash flow standpoint in the event they weren't able to pay their rent, and that one of the procedures had to be activated. Let's say they had to leave the facility.
Question and follow up to that: where are the legal fees for doing that kind of drafting incorporated into the budget? Is that incorporated in
Yes.
here?
Yep.
Okay.
It's part of that.
There's the soft costs that have been identified. It's on slide 7. It would be of our packet, slide 7. Under the uses side, there's professional services identified, and we also had financing costs identified within that.
Was that something? It was like the 93,000 or something.
94,500 and 120.
And that would cover. It just sounds like I don't know. It sounds like a very expensive thing to create these types of airtight contracts. Is that going to be enough to?
We hope so, and I mean that's our best estimate, and we'll refine the numbers if this were to proceed.
Okay.
That was based on conversations that we had with legal folks when we started this process. As I mentioned, we were on the verge of we had drafted RFPs for this work, and they were never sent out. Until you send them and get those things back, we won't know exactly what those numbers are, but that's our best estimate right now.
Great, thanks.
So, Steve?
Nope, go ahead.
Okay. This slide is really, again, boring down just a little deeper into the numbers associated with the cash flow at closing, because we wanted everybody to understand another piece of this concept that's very important to it is the growth and value of the property as time passes. We anticipated that upon completion, each unit would have a value of approximately $416,000 in the end of, well, let's say 2025. It would have a $416,000 value. By the time we get to 2028 for the takeout for the 100% income individual, we believe that property would have grown in value utilizing our assumed rate of appreciation to a number of approximately $477,000. That's about a $62,000 increase in value over that period of time. And so we need to account for who's getting the benefit of that appreciation in value. We anticipate that there's going to be a split, or there could be a split between the homeowner and the and CETA based upon the equity at the point of closing. So at closing, we have the original amount of money that I had in the answer to one of my earlier questions was how much of the advance from CETA is going to come back, and my answer there was the $3,750,000 or $375 a unit. So that's shown here. That combined with the recording fees total indicates to us that we need about $379,000, call it $380,000 at the point of closing. Where that money we expect is coming from is the $91,000 of the equity that's been built up by that homeowner during that 4-year period. There's going to be a mortgage to the homeowner in the amount of $260,000, and then we have a deferred piece that would come back upon the sale of the subsequent resale of the property of $28,000 gets us to the $379,000. So when I said about 90% in my answer to the earlier question, how much of the $375,000 is coming back? It's about 90% of that number comes back at closing. The other $28,000 is coming at a subsequent sale. But we also have the other piece of that, and that's that $61,000 of appreciation that we're looking at. So over on the right side, we've identified the payout of that based on a 70-30 split, and that 70-30 was arrived at on the basis of the equity position at the time of closing, as between the CETA and the homeowner. Ultimately, CETA could be entitled to up to $143,000 upon a subsequent resale of that property if you want to use a second mortgage to achieve that. That's again a policy question that hadn't been resolved and decided by the original. We identified that as an outstanding question in our original report to be decided by the city if it should choose to proceed with this program at all. So that's some potential additional upside there. Now, there's also the question that can come up, and we have had some of these discussions with bankers on this. Bankers generally don't like second mortgages, unless they're the ones holding the second mortgage, I guess. But
and the first.
Yeah, and the first. But the question of the second mortgage, this is a unique second mortgage situation. And I think we were able to demonstrate to the banker that their position is more than adequately covered based on the loan-to-value ratio of their first mortgage and the total value of the project. And so I think these are discussions that will be had with ultimately with bankers on this. But we feel pretty comfortable that they can be made comfortable once they understand the nature of the project and the nature of the mortgage there that we're dealing with.
Hey, Mike, just a couple questions. Does the $5,000 deposit, is that included in the $91,000 equity calculation that you've got?
Yes.
That is in there?
It's in there along with some growth in that.
Okay.
I can give you more detail on that if you'd like. I can flip to a spreadsheet if you're interested in boring down further on that. Why don't we go through this and then I can come back to that spreadsheet if you'd like. Steve, you want to take the next slide?
Yeah. So are there any questions on, and we've gone through really 4 different cash flows, 3 of them in detail, and wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to understand that. So are there any other subsequent questions that we can try to answer before we wrap this up? Okay.
I don't think so.
So we're a success? Feel free, this is a tough, there's a lot of things, moving parts, and this is tough to kind of get your arms around everything, so feel free to let us know. So, as we talked about, this gets us, the 90% that Mike has demonstrated, plus some additional dollars depending upon the policy questions that are out there. That second mortgage is the policy question. Our thought is that there's equity created while the CETA owns this, that they should get some compensation for increased value that's not reflected at takeout. There will be some increased value in the unit when it's sold in the future. And if CETA identifies upfront at closing what its share is of that equity, we believe it should receive its appropriate share down the road because of the investment they have and the fact that this is a unique program that allows people to really achieve home ownership and achieve a significant financial gain. But the city should get compensated, CETA should get compensated for this investment so that it has monies to be able to use for subsequent future programs. So that could be considerable, and as we did some future valuation increases, when you think of a 4.5% or 4% increase on $400,000 out 10 years or 30 years, that's a significant increase that the city could receive as a percentage of that equity that remains outstanding. And you'll see at this slide that we've estimated that to be, in this particular case, maybe between in 10 years, $170,000 to additional $300,000 that could be due based on the value of the building at that time. So there are some significant dollars that could be additional return to the city in future years. Our thought in the discussions we've had anyway has been is at the time of sale that equity would be returned if it's before the term of a 30-year mortgage, or if the 30-year mortgage were to run its course, it would be at that 30-year mark then that they would pay back the city for that equity stake that it has. So that's our thought. We've appreciated working on this concept. Mike and I, both were in public finance and public government for over 40 years each. This is a concept we came up with. It's not something that we're going to make a big gain on. We really think it's an interesting idea, but it has to work for you. And what we wanted to do this evening is to lay out the advantages and disadvantages, risks of this program, to see what your opinion is of this. We're certainly, for us, it's important that this reflect what you see as the need, what you think should be the design of the program. And we're certainly available to make changes and see if they work, that if you have strong feelings on some of the different elements that we've identified up to this point. We've tried to make this work, and as Mike has indicated, it's really been because of the costs, the interest rate changes, that we're doing 100% financing. We're not really excited about that from the standpoint that we had hoped to be able to leverage additional dollars by a minimal investment with TIF, which is what we demonstrated in 2021 when we had just under $1 million as the investment amount. But it does work, and I think that the way it's designed right now provides not only the dollars back to the city, but also if this second mortgage concept has any sort of legs at all, it provides something into the future that'll come back to the city to really make this a self-supporting revolving fund that creates additional dollars coming in down the road for the life of the city if it's properly designed. So that's what we see as the major value of this. But you have to be comfortable that the product that we're designing it for and the market that we're going to go after works and is something needed within the community. So those are our thoughts. Mike, anything else?
Well, I guess the only other thing would be just on the product itself. I mean, I know we've struggled with this with the city staff a little bit because we're trying to get a project built for the city that achieves your objective, but we're really wrestling with the costs, guys. I mean, these costs are tough. And so we wanted to try to build something. I mean, it was stated in the beginning that we didn't want to build. We, meaning you all, said to us, we don't want to build something that looks like public housing. We don't want to build something that looks like somebody is moving in there because they can't afford to live someplace else in the city. So we tried to be sensitive to that, and we tried to build a project that looked like other similar townhouse facilities in Fitchburg, you know, that blended in. So if you drove by this thing, you're not going to know, you know, is it what type of a project is this? It's intended to be as high quality as possible. So we got some features in here that could frankly be pared down if we're looking to pare costs. I mean, you've got, these buildings are sprinkled, for goodness sake. That's expensive. We got fancy countertops in here. We got all kind of stuff in here that, you know, it's a project that, you know, it's a nice project, I think. But there are other ways of doing projects that could bring it in at a lower cost. For one thing, you make these, this is 1,400 square feet, which is about your standard size, isn't it, Mike, for the typical townhome in Fitchburg? I think that's what you're going to see a lot of. We've looked at a lot of them online, you know, what's out there.
I have another quick money question. I'm just looking at the cash flow. So is there a fund in here somewhere for covering expenses while these people are still tenants? So they're renters, and the furnace dies, and they need to, you know, it's a $4,000 furnace that has to be replaced. Who pays for that, and is there a fund, or how do you work out those expensive repairs?
Well, we had talked about some sort of builder's warranty for some period of time that was discussed as to ensure for some period of time that those facilities, those pieces of the facilities will be working. If it's owned by the CETA, it's going to be CETA's responsibility to restore that, and that's where the debt reserve working capital was was created as a part of that, just in the event we needed to do something. But I think given the 8 to 4 year time frame, there should be most of those facilities, or all of those we're expecting, that are going to be able to work during that time frame until it's sold to the individual tenant. So, but dollars are set aside, and as I say, the warranty is something we're considering.
And I do have a question as well, but first a quick comment just to thank you for all the work and the due diligence that you have put into this project. So the question is, if this project was to move forward, like what would be your ideal timeline in doing all the work, securing the land, the construction, contractors, all of that, and when do you think it will be completed?
Well, we have to go through, like any other project, we've got to go through the entitlement process here with the city's, you know, all the steps that are necessary for that, in addition to identifying the site and then negotiating the purchase of that. We expect that we've got the documentation that we talked about that has to be created. We have to go through the entitlement of the project, which means we've got to, before we get to that, we've got to have design completed, and then we've got to negotiate we've got to negotiate a site so we know what we're dealing with in order to be able to get to final pricing. We expect that this is all going to take a minimum of 6 months to 10 months to complete, to get to that realistically. I don't know, Steve. That's what I think we talked about, but
yeah,
no, I don't want to.
Yeah, I think, you know, we're prepared to stop on the project or move ahead on the project, whatever the city wants to do. Our schedule is not going to be an impediment to that, and I know that there are certain steps that we need to go through in the city, both from an approval standpoint as well as from a permitting standpoint. And I mean, we can, I think, get a better handle on that once we've got an opportunity, if we were to proceed to say, when we come back to you with the final cost, we certainly should include some better timeline estimate as to how that would play out.
You know, we had a timeline laid out for this back in February of 2022. We had that laid out. And I'd have to go back and refresh my memory, but I think it was it was about a year. But between the time that we got from start, from the point of getting that approval and getting the site identified to actually starting construction, it was a 10 to 12 month process. And in Fitchburg, I think that's pretty realistic.
Where I live, which many of the, many new construction and buildings have come up, I thought that the general feeling was people wanted to have a good home in Fitchburg, but they wanted to make sure it was very, very reasonable, etc. A lot of what you've talked about was right in the back of my mind, and my God, if we are only going to look at relatively expensive buildings, that puts us in a very, in my opinion, a very bad place, because several times I went to the property to take a look at it and found how much they were being sold for. The prices have gone exceptionally high, and I'm just concerned about some of the people in our community. How would they be able to live in Fitchburg, without some of the things they have in the back of their mind, and this might just be too expensive for them going forward. And that's not what I think we want to do in our city, to have, high building for a lot of our people. And in the back of my mind, maybe not for this, but put in the back of your mind that this is an organization, our city is a place where everybody who lives here gets an opportunity to be part and parcel of what and who we are. And I just hope we're not trying to build the kinds of homes that will make sizable members of people in our city not to be able to, buy a home or even live in Fitchburg in the future. That to me is in the back of my mind, because I recall when those new buildings came up there, people were very, very sensitive at the fact that, boy, the prices was exceptionally high. I thought the first time I wanted one of the units up there, they were more than $200,000 plus. And when this goes this way, it's going to go, higher as we move, as the economy continues to live. So in the back of my mind, that's something in the back of my mind. I would like to be able to get housing in Fitchburg that everybody here will have an opportunity to be part and parcel of, rather than create a Fitchburg place only. And that really, I'll tell you in all honesty, that bothers me, because I don't think that's what we have to do in Fitchburg. We want to give everybody an opportunity to live in Fitchburg, not just make it an exclusive place for some people.
Well, your comments are very apropos in this respect. It's a challenge.
It is.
To meet all the objectives within the framework of what's financially feasible. You have you defined the idea of wanting to make it possible for individuals within this income bracket to not have to expend more than 30% of their income for housing. And so to achieve that, we've struggled with this a lot.
I don't think so.
In terms of juggling the numbers to try to achieve it, to try to continue to still make it possible for the city create a program that would achieve what we were originally trying to do, which was a replicable program, could be done again and again, and still make it possible for people in those income levels to have a home that they would own for the first time. And so the costs sometimes you have to make choices, and those choices may come in the form of the size and finishes that you would like to have. Something that you'd like to have, prefer to have, may have to be modified if you want to still make something work financially. Just a reality.
Yeah, and be available within a reasonable time frame, which is that 4 to 8 year period. We really didn't want to go 10 or longer. It just seems like that was too long, and 4 to 8 is at least there's a horizon that you think you can get there. And so that's the other trade-off that we had to struggle with, is how do we bring it back to, when we ran the first model based on the new rates, it was like, oh my goodness.
Mallory, can I just chime in on Godwin's?
Sure.
Just Godwin, this is one program that's focused on, kind of that missing middle at 80 to 100%. And we were just at a housing conference at the Fluno Center on Friday of last week through the UW Real Estate School, and they were emphasizing again the need and how that segment of the population is a lot of times forgotten about. With programs, whether it be these types of programs or even down payment assistance. Once you get into that income level, those programs even lop off and everything. So in our minds, this is a program for that specific kind of segment of the population. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not looking at other housing ownership programs for below 80% of median income. And as my colleagues Joyce and Lorena kind of explained under the staff report, they're already in conversations about maybe potential collaborations and partnerships with folks like the Madison Area Community Land Trust or Habitat for Humanity that would focus on programs for housing ownership below 80%. And that's why maybe through a land banking or some of those activities, we would be looking at other kind of collaborations and strategic partnerships. So there's no one program that's the one size fits all that solves everything. This is one that's focused on that 80 to 100%. But I think as you'll hear from their staff reports when we get into that section, that doesn't preclude us from looking at other partnerships and models that would look at ownership for below 80% of median income.
Question from me. So first, thank you so much for your presentation. You guys came to Committee of the Whole, which I appreciated in this, and I feel like I have a really good understanding of the program and appreciate your passion for trying to get this worked out, because I know it's really complicated and you had answers to all my initial questions, which is really impressive. So thank you for all your hard work on this. I actually have quite a lot of questions, which, true to form, and might take longer than we have today. Do we have to be out by 6? Is that? Okay, we don't have a time limit. What I'm hoping for, from a council perspective, I do think is important that we make a decision to move forward with this sooner rather than later. We have to make a call. And I'm really interested to hear what all the people on the committee have to say about this and what your thoughts are, because I have a lot of questions, I have a lot of concerns, but a lot of the people on this committee have a lot more expertise in housing than I will ever have. So I really am interested to see what you have to say, and really in a context of how would you advise the council on making this decision based on your expertise in housing? That's the question I have for the committee to respond to, if you're willing.
I'll start. This is Marshall. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
This is Marshall.
Yeah, go ahead, Marshall.
Can you hear me? I'll comment. Okay. Well, first I have to appreciate, having done this task in the past, how complex it is to make a project pencil. And given the fact that this is a project that yet doesn't have a piece of land that we can design to, that doesn't have, the cost of the land and the ability to hire the architect, the contractor, all of the various things that, you do your very best to estimate the costs of what all of those fees are going to be, which is a challenge in a hypothetical. Also, looking at the construction cost of the building, having all of those other things in hand, it is easier to value engineer some items to a lower, more affordable price as you're looking at the total construction price for a project, right? And you can go to Formica countertops. All of us probably started out with a Formica countertop in our first home, not granite. There are many ways you can look at making the building a little bit more affordable, and shrinking room sizes a tiny bit, but the thing that I would ask people to consider is that true, this is a section that is missing. We don't have the 80% to 100% project and properties here, especially given the last influences of the housing market and the loan market, double whammy there. So, it is something that is going to, I think, cost us more money than we had originally intended. I don't know if there's any other sources out there. I did see in the development sources you had a $200,000 grant. Why 200K? Is there more grant funds available to us that we could bring into this to help reduce what the city's costs are, or to help, pad the budget a little bit so there's not such a hit on the city? I don't know. I don't know if WIDA would be willing to give anything to an 80 to 100% AMI project. I know they generally are 60 and under, but is there something? Does Dane County have funds that would be available to a project like this so that we could bring in maybe more sources to help ameliorate the cost of this project? So that's my comments there.
What's up? Brian?
Well, one of the things I was just kind of looking at is when this converts to home ownership, the real estate taxes are going to go from a tax in lieu of $2,800 to like $9,500. So that's like a $7,000 jump per year to the homeowners when they become homeowners. And so I think that needs to be taken into account when that transition can happen. Because we say 4 years, but it might actually be 4.5 just because of the tax cost to maintain that 30%. And the other thing that we're hoping in this model is that they're going to have a 4% increase per year in their income. We've been hitting that the last couple of years with COVID and appreciation, but statistically it's normally between 2.8 and 3.2%. So 4% might be a little bit of an aggressive number as far as income growth for the potential people. In the model, that's one of my concerns. I was just trying to run the numbers, and with the 4%, it comes out that they probably can make that balance with the real estate taxes after 4 years, but if it's only 3%, it's probably going to take an extra 6 months, just my quick math here. So that's just some of the number side of it from that aspect. Obviously, the construction stuff is, there's no way we're going to be able to button that down to come up with a budget until you have a site. And as I've worked with city staff a lot trying to identify sites like this, there are none in the city of Fitchburg that meet current zoning. And so I know our zoning code is going to be rewritten hopefully in the next year and a half. But right now I'm skeptical that we could even build this project in the city of Fitchburg with the current zoning code that's out there, because I don't think there are parcels, unless a developer specifically designs a site for a townhouse for 10 units, that we can find a site that we can build this. We may be able to find land, but that land might have one water service to it, and now we're going to have to divide that into 10, redo the street, we're going to have a lot of street repairs. So that's why I say the cost may come and vary a lot depending on what site we are, because there may be $250,000 in just site improvements to get water and sewer into this, and then the other part of this comes is with the fire sprinklers. I mean, I think the number of this construction cost includes fire sprinklers is probably actually light. I don't think we can get it done nowadays at these numbers. With fire sprinklers, there are other systems that maybe we can make work with a Watts, I can't remember what the number is, like Watts 1100. It's a little bit more of a residential style fire sprinkler per unit versus an apartment style where it's one main system for the entire building. So that might be one way where we can save some on costs, but I think You know, the whole conversation about what materials the unit should have and et cetera, I think, you know, truthfully, they're probably not going to be able to have quartz and granite countertops, and they're not going to be able to have hardwood floors in order to meet this price point. We might be able to make them look similar on the exterior, but on the interior, I think they're just going to have to be more of what I would call entry-level housing product. I know the other part of this that scares me is when this goes through architectural approval through the city process and plan commission, what the plan commission will do to the building as far as what they want it to look like. How much masonry, how much stucco, what type of siding. If you look at HUD standards, the year's difference for a product's lifespan between vinyl siding and LP or smart siding is 4 years. It's 43 for vinyl, it's 47 for LP. But the LP will cost us 40% more in product material. So we're really not gaining anything more in lifespan, but we're making the building more expensive just so it looks pretty. And these are things that I think the city really needs to contemplate when we're looking at building a building that we're going to own, where we're trying to hit affordable housing and trying to hit a price point. The city is going to have to look earnestly at its own expectations of what it wants to have for a finished product in order to meet a price point that can be effective for the median income that we're looking to get. So that's my comments.
I 100% agree with you on all of that.
This is Mario on the CETA side, and for what's worth it, I think to the question of what or how we should advise the city council, I think that in my mind we have to move forward with this project, or we should move forward with this project. I think you've seen that we have the financial stability to be able to at least try to do. And I think that we gotta be comfortable with the uncertainty that comes with this type of project. I think that you have sharp people here at the table and sharp people who are gonna be carry this project forward. So I really, I have the trust that they will be able to do it responsibly. Of course, we gotta keep and talk about all the potential risks that this project has, and there are thousands or maybe more than 1,000 risks here. But we don't have to let that to paralyze us and not to do anything about the need that we have in our community right now. As a resident of Fitchburg, I see this as part of the responsibility for us people who get engaged in the CETA side of me, but also in other committees to bring solutions to the issues that we face in our community. So housing, it's at the top of that. So again, for me, it's how do we move forward in a way that is creative, that is flexible enough, that will be a win-win situation at the end of the day. So that will be my advice, Gabriela.
Olivia?
Yeah, I just want to first say thank you for all the work that you have done on this, on the staff side. Oh, hold on a second. On the staff side, as well as H&A advisors. This has been a long road, and I know I felt disheartened over the years because, you know, it's just been a really challenging, very complicated thing. So I just want to say thank you to the staff. Thank you to H&A for all of your hard work on this. And I completely agree with all the comments from Michelle to Brian to, everybody's thoughts and about wanting to go forward as well. I had the pleasure of being at the Terravesa job fair this past week, and I think I saw you, Mike, out there. And so I was particularly appreciative of Brian's comments about, these finishes and ways to, reduce costs and value engineer, which I think Marshall both talked about. I really feel like if we looked at this project as entry-level housing, it feels like it would make more sense. Entry-level housing in terms of, first-time home buyers, because, other than the few houses that, Habitat and MACLT can bring forward, this really is an opportunity for us to bring forward first-time home ownership opportunities for missing middle families and residents. So it feels like having that perspective feels a more appropriate way to view this, to frame it, to structure it, and moving towards that as a goal, as opposed to a nicer home, and being concerned with, as some of the things that Brian mentioned, these finishes. And certainly I learned a lot about the exteriors of buildings looking at Terra Vista this weekend, and how much more expensive things are when you're adding stone and you're requiring, 2 feet of stonework below the siding on a foundation all the way around the house, and et cetera. And one thing I'm curious to consider is, can we talk about having one car garage or no garages at all? And don't expect an answer right now, but it's just something that I thought about, considering Fitchburg, as well as many other municipalities, including Dane County, has a very high sustainability goal and wanting to reduce, our impacts on climate change. So I wonder if that's something that could be considered. And I also wonder if, if we've been talking about doing this at one unit at a time, but it seems like we would save money if we found, we did this 5 units at a time. I think, Brian, you could probably build a house, you could probably, get some economies of scale if you were building 5 townhomes as opposed to 1 at a time, or 1 a year over 5 years. And then the only other thing is, I feel like it would be really helpful for us to build in some sort of a contingency. And maybe I missed that in the slides, because we know that there's only one way that housing supply costs are going, and that's up. And so, by the time this lifts off, maybe it's 2 years, maybe it's 3 years, given we might need a zoning code update in between, it feels like we really need to be very diligent about including the contingency for, related expenses that we're not accounting for right now. And that's my only other observation, except to say thank you so much for all your hard work.
Again, we've had this conversation so many times. I do want to thank you for all your work and information that you provided us. I think that the rent-to-own concept is a viable concept. I know it's been tried before in different scenarios. I'm not sure about the viability, marketability of this. I would assume that this would be something that would appeal to first-time home buyers, but I don't know. So I'm assuming that this is a product that has marketability, that will find renters and homeowners who will stay in for 4 or 8 years before they get a deed. Given that, let's say that this is something that is oversubscribed to, that we get lots of interest for it. I look at construction costs here, average of $300 a square foot. I think Brian makes some very valid points, and so does Olivia. I think we should look at this as a first-time home buyer opportunity. I look at some of the things that are in these construction costs. We've talked before about modification of fees that are assessed by the city. I don't know, was this slab on grade, or did we have a basement in here? For the
No
unit?
basement.
No basement? So again, something to make this more affordable. $416,000 for a townhome. It just seems like it's a bit above what I would assume for entry level. In what way can we modify this? Do the units all have to be sprinklered? In what ways could we save some costs? You know, I don't know if the city could look at the infrastructure costs and if there's some way to contribute some of those to reduce the cost of construction. That is my biggest concern. I think that's about it. Anybody else have any questions, comments?
I guess my only other observation would be that because this is taxpayer dollars, I would like to see this as affordable moving forward. So doing everything we can to make these units less expensive, so that when someone does move out in 4 or 8 or 10 or 12 years because they need more space because their family's growing or because whatever reason, that when they come back to the market, that they're still as reasonably, you know, valued as possible. And so I feel like that's, you know, taking into consideration some very serious cost-cutting measures like 1-car garage or no car garages or whatever we need to do seems to be a really important component of this. Yeah. I mean, if we can make rent-to-own work in Dane County, I mean, it'll be a huge achievement. So I think we need to keep thinking about it and working at it, but, you know.
Joyce, Steve, any comments?
I guess from a staff perspective, as I said at the committee of the whole, we have put a lot of time and effort into this project, worked really diligently with Mike and Steven. They've stuck with us through the good times and the bad. But we would personally like to see us at least move to the next stage in which we start preparing these legal documents. We've been at a standstill. This is the most important part because this is where we start to really develop the program. We start working out the details and we really put our best foot forward. And I feel like, we'll only know if we try it. The one thing that really intrigues me about the program is that we get money back. And we have this $9 million and it looks like a lot of money and everybody's really excited about it. But once it's gone, and we don't have a means of replenishing the fund. And that we want to be very good stewards about taxpayer dollars, and Mike and I have put a lot of time and thought into this is a great model. We vetted it with other communities. We vetted it with WEDA, with WEDC, and we have a lot of different people that think it's a great concept. If we can make it work, we need to be the ones to do it. If it doesn't work, then we've said, hey, we've tried. We don't do it again. But if it does work, we got a great product, and we can be a model community, and I know other communities are waiting for us to move forward. So that would be my ask is that we move forward with the documentation, because I think that's where we're going to work out a lot of the details and things that, the questions that we're receiving. So I'm done with my sermon. Mike, Lorene, do you have anything to add?
I was just going to say, I think this could be a really innovative program model, and even as we've talked to folks at Dane County, as we've talked to other communities within Dane County, as we've talked to the stakeholders that we interviewed for the due diligence, everybody is intrigued by the model and is like, Fitchburg, run with it, because if it works, they want to replicate it there. And I think, again, we've got two savvy financial stewards here that have always guided Fitchburg, through to the highest and best use of our finances here. And we couldn't have two better consultants to be looking at a program and a pilot program for us, who also watch out for our financial health and stewardship here. So I really would like to go to the next phase where we do more due diligence, we get those documents, hopefully that answers more questions and concerns. Hopefully we zero in on a site so we can quantify, a few things. And I think we've got some landowners and developers that, we could kind of do further due diligence with to kind of refine the program model and everything. One thing I will say as far as the product there, that was probably guided by city staff there as far as the product and even including fire safety sprinkler system. We wanted to, if CETA was going to be involved and be owning it and everything, we wanted something that was basically consistent or, with market rate here, and that for the city to say, well, we're not going to do a sprinkler system, but maybe we're requiring private sector developers to do a sprinkler system, that was something I personally am like, well, we need to kind of walk the talk, here too, if those are some of our requirements. But if you want us to look at other options, that's something we can explore there. But that was the initial kind of guidance, and I think we also heard that from committee members when we kind of came out and just kind of got feedback on the product was, a lot of times we as the city are asking developers to do things, and shouldn't we also be kind of following suit on that? So that was just kind of our perspective and philosophy, there. With regards to infrastructure and fees, one of the things there is we as staff, can't make that decision. That's a policymaker, discussion and conversation. So we have to kind of adhere to our current fee schedule and ordinances. I think those conversations will probably start to come to the forefront here as we explore other programs and kind of policies here. But right now, we don't, that's not in place to have any relief in those areas based on our current statutes and policy. So that's why kind of the model is based on the numbers that they are at this point in time.
Okay, so are you asking us to take a position tonight and to vote on that as it relates to? No.
Yeah, tonight was just really a work session, and we don't have it down as an action item. Okay. So we'd have to kind of notice it and agenda it, for it. But I think part of the goal, at least in my mind, is we invited CETA and council here. Not everybody was able to make it, but thankfully we have FACTv covering this.
There you go.
And so I think one of the things we'd like to do is send this link out to other council and CETA members and just say, hey, here's some homework for you to do, to really watch the work session that we went through here. And I don't know, I'll recap with Mike and Stephen with our colleagues here to say, do we kind of give that as a homework exercise and then ask those folks that maybe weren't in attendance, do they have other questions, or concerns? And I know, Gabriella, you mentioned you've got, do we kind of have a date by where we ask for some other questions to be submitted by? Just to really fully vet it and give everybody their opportunity to ask any questions and concerns, that they have. So then when we maybe bring it forward for actual consideration and, do we get the green light from council, we can say we've thoroughly and fully, again, allowed all of our kind of constituencies to ask their questions and to vet it. I don't know how other people feel here, but I just want to make sure, because we did hear at the committee of the whole meeting, people didn't feel like they had a full chance to really delve into the information and the numbers, and it has changed so much, since 2021. Plus, the other thing is, I was teasing Gabriella that she's now the veteran on the council here. We've had faces change on the council from when the program was first unanimously approved. So we need to give that kind of next generation that are new since this program was approved and adopted, their full opportunity to kind of review the materials and really get their questions and concerns answered too.
Yeah, go ahead, Gabrielle.
From my perspective, I feel like I got what I was hoping to get out of this meeting, especially I feel like I really understand the concept at a much higher level. I know you guys gave a lot of detail at the committee of the whole, but I was left with a lot of uncertainty, and I feel like most of my questions have been allayed. The one key piece of the question, which I think can be handled at a later date, is really how we choose those owners and how we work with them over time. That's a complicated thing that like a true property management company would not have the expertise to do. It's like more closer to a social service agency. And so a nonprofit partner seems like it would be a better fit for that. But that's a challenging piece of it, and maybe that's more fleshed out in some other documents that hasn't been covered, and I don't think that has to be answered tonight, unless you want to comment on it, but that's a piece that has the biggest uncertainty left for me.
I will comment because we have talked to, I think, at least three nonprofits that have done like variations of this type of program who would be willing to be that partner.
Okay.
They do the education, they do the pre-qualifications, they do a lot of that type of work that have expressed an interest in being a partner on this.
Great. That's awesome to know.
Could I just add in that discussion? I know there's also been a concern about the financial wherewithal of whoever the management company is, and there had been discussions of what level of indemnification do you need from that management company. And my concern would be, I think the nonprofits would provide more an appropriate vehicle here. I agree with your comments in regards to how they've screened tenants and would look at that. But I think it's going to be more of an issue on the identification side of what kind of financial assurances can they provide CETA, that this is going to take place. So there's going to have to be some discussion to reconcile that is I think, one issue that will be a part of that discussion.
And that's all to say that I feel much more comfortable with this concept now than I did a couple of weeks ago at Committee of the Whole. So I'm going to talk at council next week, try to recap this in a very broad sense, because obviously I cannot recap it in a deep sense, but at least I can give overarching views. And I will impart, and I hope this is accurate, so please speak up if it's not, that the Housing Advisory Committee, what I'm hearing is that you think this is a viable concept, approaches to move forward with it and consider those details like how to create more affordability and getting into the nitty-gritty of it as we push this into the next phase, and not try to figure it out now before we move forward. But the recommendation is to move forward.
I think what we will take back to CETA, since CETA is the housing authority, is that, and I guess Jenny, if she's still on, she can report out that that there is a desire for us to move forward with at least starting to get the legal part and the programming together. And that's really the foundation of the whole entire program, is getting those pieces in place. And then we can delve into the questions about equity and appreciation and look backs and all that kind of stuff. But I think right now it's just getting the concept going. And that's what I wanted all along, because I knew that the market conditions weren't the best right now. But it's okay if we have to wait. As long as we have the program solidified that we can, when we're ready to roll it out, we can roll it out. If the market conditions get better, if the costs come down a little bit, if we find that site, those are all, we have a lot of work yet to do, but knowing that we can move forward is the biggest part. So hopefully Jenny can take that back. Hi, Mark.
Can you guys hear me? I'm agreeing with what you just said, and I've also been listening the whole time. I apologize. I had a car problem this afternoon, but I think it is time. Let's get it in front of CETA again and get ready to go forward, along with all the good questions that were raised. So this has been going on since 2021, and I think it's something good for our city to try and get out ahead of this and give it a go. So I support it going back to CETA. And Jenny, you still there too?
Yes, I am here.
Okay. You can weigh in.
Yeah, I agree. I think the devil's in the details for me, I guess. I think in theory, this is a great idea. We have to do something. But it's all the little, you got to fine tune all these little things. As a realtor, my mind goes to, how are these homeowners going to transition into that ownership, and if they want to go to sell that property, what does that look like in the future, and the equity of it. The cost obviously factors in tremendously. If we can keep the costs down initially, that just means there's that much more equity for these homeowners to build, and therefore wealth, which is, one of the two main points of doing this. So, so I agree. No, I'm excited to continue the conversations.
Mallory, I was just going to add, we want to get to a decision point this year. Yeah, we've been doing the due diligence since 2021, so we want to bring it to, hopefully we get the green light, we get kind of formal authorization of the council to proceed with those next steps. But we just are ready now, or we got to get to a decision point, one way or the other, and that's why we wanted to take the time tonight to do this work session, so everybody feels has a good understanding and can make an informed decision when we kind of bring things forward. And like we said, we'll get it out to the other groups to make sure that they've got a thorough vetting of it. But I'll check with administration too. I always have to kind of make sure I'm in sync and not getting out front of my skis here as far as timing and kind of being on the agendas and stuff like that. So we'll check in with City Administrator Chad Brecklin, too, and let him know kind of the conversation tonight and how do we bring this forward for that decision point at the council.
Okay.
Can I just add a point? I'm newer to the department, but again, we kind of talked about different segments of the market, and this is one segment, so the 80%. So this is one start for entry level, but we're looking at different areas as well. So like we kind of talked before of the land trust and also Habitat for Humanity. So this isn't for all of the population, but for the 80% population. So I think it is a good entryway for that population. So.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Steve and Mike, for coming. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
No one has any more questions? So I think that's it. We'll talk then also, then we have your department presentation then this evening.
Yeah, we just included the presentation just as an FYI for you guys, because we haven't really had a chance to kind of catch up with the council, and we just thought we would share it with you in case you guys were interested in what we had to say.
So no other announcements then?
We do have a couple announcements. Our next meeting will be in December, right? Yuck. And we will probably be having a presentation from a single family developer kind of talking about the cost to do a development as another kind of educational piece for us. Do you guys have anything you want to share?
Lorene, do you want to just talk about, just real quick, about a couple of the grants opportunities that we've been focused on?
Sure. So I guess a couple of opportunities. One is the small business grant. We're working with the organization, I know the abbreviation, which is NHTI. And basically what they're doing is working on entrepreneurship. So working directly in the healthy neighborhoods, having a program to teach them about entrepreneurship and hopefully to help them to create a business. So it's an 11-week program, meets twice a week. They're going to have 2 cohorts, approximately 10 to 12 individuals in these cohorts, and again, kind of teaching them from beginning to end. So things such as like a business plan, how to work with banks, the financial piece of it. So they'll be working directly with the individuals that are interested in creating businesses and helping them from start to finish. So another grant program.
What is that called? Sorry, what is that grant program called?
That's the small business grant through WIDA.
That's through WEDC. This is a pilot grant program, and we would be focused on our healthy neighborhoods, specifically Verona Road Corridor, Belmar, South Fish Hatchery Road, and Southdale, specifically on that.
So we are finishing that grant process, and we'll be submitting that this end of this week. And then we'll soon hear, probably by the end of the year, if we are awarded that grant. So we're crossing our fingers. And then we are also looking at a grant working with the City of Madison for, I don't know, you want to kind of explain it a little bit more? Or
Are you on the CDBG Pro one now?
Yes.
Yeah, we're working with Dane County and leveraging a potential grant application with Dane County, Sun Prairie, Monona, and Fitchburg. And one of the things that this collective group of staff people, we're trying to be strategic and also trying to leverage our dollars. And this is an opportunity where the $1 million that right now is identified in the land bank in the current 2025 budget projected there, we could leverage those dollars for land acquisition that then would allow us to get an additional $500,000 potentially to assist with infrastructure costs related to a development. And this is something that in Lorene and Joyce's conversations with Dane County that they became aware of, that Dane County was going to submit an application. We were looking at submitting our own, and collectively us doing it together as multi-jurisdictional will strengthen the overall application and potential chance of success. But that's, again, another model that we're trying to do where we can take our $1 million and maybe get another $500,000 that could help to actually drive a project that would be housing related here in Fitchburg. So we're keeping our fingers crossed. I think the submittal date for that one is this week as well. So the grant applications are coming fast and furious. So Joyce and Lorene have been working overtime trying to get all the materials put together.
And actually, that one's actually been submitted as of last Friday. Yes.
So is there a Department of Energy grant that we were awarded but didn't know the amount yet, or there was another grant?
Yeah, there's a couple out there that we're still waiting for announcements.
Okay, so to be determined. We don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's we partnered with the City of Madison on a Department of Energy grant for expanding our Efficiency Navigator program, and then we also applied for a planning grant with the City of Madison to actually scale the Efficiency Navigator program. And I know that one we were awarded, however, we haven't received any money yet. I think they're still working out the MOU on that. And I just wanted to mention too, on the pro-housing grant that they were talking about, in addition to our $1 million leverage, we also leveraged our funding that we're going to use for our ARPA TID dollars for the zoning code rewrite and our comprehensive plan, which will push the county's score up. So, Olivia, remember that? Fitchburg we're going above and beyond to help out the county here. So don't forget about us.
We're being good partners.
One other grant that we actually just submitted is with the Realtors Association. So actually 2 different grants. So one is to have a developers roundtable in early quarter of next year, just to kind of get all the developers kind of in the room and talking, and then also kind of learning about what hurdles that developers may have and what ways that we can assist them. And the other piece is another grant that was applied for is updating our housing element in the housing plan. And really focusing on our healthy neighborhoods, because I think in our previous plan, the voice of our healthy neighborhoods, the residents that live there, was not reflected in that. And so making sure that this new updated plan really reflects their voice and their concerns in regards to housing and ways that we can better their situation. And that's it.
So will you be going back to the Committee of the Whole to discuss the rent-to-own program at all in, next month, November?
That's why I need to check in with administration
okay.
and Council President Gabriella there, just to kind of see what what path do they want us to follow there. Yeah.
Okay.
But it'll be either November or December where I think we want to get to, again, that decision point.
Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Can I, one more announcement from me, if that's okay?
Sure.
Just want to let you all know that the referendum information sessions are still ongoing. So just since you guys are representing the city in a way, I wanted to let you know that there's sessions on October 17, October 21, and October 28. And if you go to fitchburgwi.gov/referendum, you can find information about those informational meetings and then also just about the referendum in general. Thanks.
Sounds good.
Oh, I got a question for you. Are they doing a joint press conference, the mayors, on the referendum?
I don't know.
Did I see something about that?
I have no
was just
idea.
wondering if you could give us an update on what that is.
I've not heard of anything like that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to adjourn meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike and Steve.
Yeah.